not much time passes, you know, after this discard, between the first discard and when we get back together again. Not much time passes at all. Like I said, it was around May 25th when I was getting that antibiotic, and we were back in each other's lives again at that point. So it must have been a couple of days, maybe a week at most. Since I don't remember like what initiated the contact again and how we got back together, I know it wasn't like a big deal kind of thing, because it would have been easy to reinitiate contact at that point. And while he was abusive in the text message to me, he wasn't really yelling too many verbally abusive things at me in person yet at this point, although we do get to that. I feel like I've blocked a lot of it out. Okay, so then June rolls around. We did spend a good amount of June together, and this is when the abuse started to really ramp up, the emotional abuse and psychological abuse. And I was really spending like hardly any time at home. And our landlord had gone on a several week long vacation to like Spain. So I was watching his dog. So I did have to be home a certain amount for the dog, in addition to the cats. And we were also discussing me moving in with him on like July 1st. So I was spending a fair amount of my time in June during like a week or two that was like, you know, good, rock solid, bringing my things over there. Okay, you know, talking out loud like this is good because it triggers the timeline, the memories. And I can tell you that in May, after that first initial discard, granted I was gotten sick, I also remember going through a pretty significant bout of situational depression at that point. I remember feeling pretty apathetic about my job at that point, like work in general, because I had no energy. Like all of the life had kind of been drained from me. I remember that's what it felt like. And I remember talking to my mom one day and telling her that like it was just an effort to lift my own arm up, to actually hold my own head up. I was so lethargic that all I wanted to do was lay in my bed. And I had never experienced that before. So that was pretty significant. And it was also when I started having this significant neck pain. And I had to go to network spinal analysis, which is a really good modality of healing I've used in the past. And I remember the lady saying to me, she was like, "Is this all emotional?" She was like, "I think you should get an x-ray." She's like, "Is this from emotional stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." And I was really scared and embarrassed at that point to say and admit that I was in an abusive relationship. And in fact, it felt really uncomfortable to say that I was in an abusive relationship, because it didn't quite even make sense to me. And I was still like learning about all of the elements. Yeah, I remember going to the gynecologist around that time to, like for my annual. And I do remember going through like an emotional behavioral assessment, general one, and telling the clinician, about how I was feeling and what I was going through, and that I felt like I was maybe in an abusive relationship. I also had this feeling then, this is kind of interesting, kind of stupid, but I think a lot of people feel this way and can relate to this. I had this feeling then like I can handle it, in the sense that I knew he didn't actually mean these things, that a lot of times he was saying these things and texting me these really nasty things, calling me names, because he, has this problem. So I was able to separate the abuse a lot as far as the emotional stuff, and say like, because and then he would come back, of course, and say that he didn't mean, he's like, of course, I don't mean these things, blah, blah, blah. He's like, that, none of these things are true. Because as time marched on, and especially as we get through June, and then when the second discard happened, and I had tons of my stuff at his house, and I didn't end up moving in with him, and this was like maybe around like June 19th, this second big discard, this is when there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of yelling, and I just couldn't even believe it. I should probably look back at my pictures to help jog my memory on things, but he was really good at the name calling. Everything from, me being a whore, a slut, needing attention from men, God, I can't even remember half the stuff. It's probably really good. Yeah, part of me wishes I had those text messages, because one time in June, after this big second discard, I woke up to this string of text messages, like he had been drinking and just went on a rager. This string of text messages, and I couldn't even read them all. And I remember just deleting them. It made me so sick. So sick. Just totally destroying me as a person. And as he called it later on, he said, "I'm sorry, I scorched earth you," which I had never heard that term before. Apparently that's a term. I was like, yeah, well, that was really unnecessary. So the name calling was bad. It was out of control. Yeah, I remember like sometime in this time frame too, like we went on a hike one night, and maybe this is when, actually I think this is when we got back together after that first discard. It was a hike that we went on in late May, and because I remember I still wasn't feeling well, so it was probably right before the antibiotics, and it was a Friday night. We went for a hike, and I was having a hard time with the hike, which is very unlike me. I mean, I run up hills and elevation better than he does. And I was emotionally beaten down by this guy, and I was sick. And I agreed to go on this hike with him. He'd be, "Oh, well, let's go on a nice, you never want to do anything, you're always so lame." Like, because I was freaking abused and tired and drained of energy in life. So we go on this hike. We're watching the sunset. I'm getting cold, and we proceed to hike back down, and we're gonna get in the car and drive back. For a good portion of the hike down, he was just speeding ahead of me, berating me, how lame I am. I have no physical stamina. That's not exactly what he said, but he was basically implying that I was really a lame person, and that I have all these opportunities to do things, and I am just being really lame and boring and like not somebody worth his time. And I remember hiking down behind him, like trying to keep up with him, thinking like, why am I even here? Why am I listening to this crap from this person? Why am I even taking any of this? And you know, every time, and this is a big part of abuse, right? So every time he would do this shit, say these mean things, you know, in the apologetic phase, he would always tell me that none of those things are true, and that I'm really strong and beautiful and, you know, too good for him, and he's just a loser with a bed, and blah blah blah. These are good reminders. Telling the stories, revisiting the memories, rereading my notes, they're good reminders as to why we're not together, and why we could never be together again. Because even after all of the bad stuff, you know, even on my run this morning, I find myself thinking about John all too much still, and thinking about the man that he could be, and the man that I thought I fell in love with, and the soul match that we have. But in reality, he's none of those things to me. So if I find myself caught in a thought or a daydream of still wanting to be with him and him growing enough and making it work, I try and remind myself that, like, I think of a memory at that time to remind myself that we are literally way too far gone. There is literally no way in hell that we could ever be together here on earth. And that's largely, you know, it's because of him. It's because of him. He'll say it's because of me. But all of my efforts to convince him and show him that I wasn't the things that he says, they didn't, like, get better over time like I thought they would. Like, I thought given more time, he's gonna feel the bond of our love more, and he's gonna let some of this stuff go, and he's gonna stop accusing me so much. Didn't happen. I managed to find myself, like, more and more in twisted positions where it was almost like the more I stayed with him, the more I was going to be tortured and for something I didn't do, no matter what. He would still find a way to turn it around and point the finger at me, no matter what. So it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You open your mouth to say something to even defend yourself, and oops, you've made it worse. Oops, you've just convinced him more that you are what he thinks you are. So with all of that in place, even if he had healthy emotional boundaries and coping mechanisms where he was able to look past some of these things and say, I really want to be with you, and I'm going to put all of this aside, and I want to heal together and work on these insecurities together and not blame you for them and not take this out on you and XYZ. that would still be a challenge. So in the way he operates, he's always going to think, no matter what, even if we get back together, he'll basically just think in his mind that he's forgiving me and accepting me, but I'm still this way. So there will come a time where he will demand information from me on some level, in some form. Tell me that I'm secretive, sneaky, I'm secretive with my phone. Well, I'm not. And when somebody is so abrasive all of the time, you begin to basically ignore your phone. Like, well, I'm not going to look at that because he's going to think that I'm doing something. So all of a sudden I'm sneaky with my phone, though, instead. This got so bad over time that eventually, of that last episode together, the last interaction we had was his hands gripping my phone and my hands gripping my phone, trying to take my phone away from him while he looks at my phone. I mean, we eventually got to that point where this person wouldn't let this shit go and needs my phone. So even if, like, everything lined up perfectly and we could be together and blah, 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 there would still come some circumstance, something. I mean, I wouldn't even be able to comfortably use my phone, put it that way. I just wouldn't. I'll never be able to be comfortable around this person in any way, shape, or form. So, and I don't even really like him, right? When you think about all this stuff as a person, I don't like these traits. So why would I want to be with him? However, I still have thoughts and memories, and they haunt me, and so it is good to revisit these these memories so that I remind myself, no way in hell. Cheers.